Hello, my name is Ethan Basch from the University of North Carolina, and I'm honored to present to you today on integrating patient-reported outcomes into electronic health record systems in oncology. These are my disclosures. The last time I presented to this group, I began with this slide as well, because to me, this is a reminder that for me as an oncologist and as a leader in a practice and in a cancer hospital, that patients and their experiences are at the center of everything that we do. Now, symptoms and physical function decrements are exceedingly common among patients with cancer, particularly during systemic treatment. Symptoms, when not well controlled, can be a cause of hospitalizations and emergency room visits, of unnecessary suffering, particularly at home when patients are out of sight and out of mind, and are a frequent cause of dose delays or modifications. And therefore, symptom monitoring is a cornerstone of oncology care. We need to understand our patients' symptoms, catch them as early as we can in order to avoid downstream complications. But unfortunately, multiple studies have now shown that we as providers miss about half of the symptoms that our patients experience during cancer treatment. This is a graphic on the left from one such study in which patients and their providers, the patients self-reported and the clinicians reported common symptoms during cancer treatment for up to 2 years. And as the cumulative incidence curves show, there's a big delta between the patient-reported lines in orange and the clinician-reported lines in blue, showing that over time, we miss a substantial number of our patients' symptoms. This is a problem because if we don't catch symptoms early, then we can't intervene and avoid those downstream complications. But this also represents an opportunity, perhaps to harness emerging technologies to close this gap. Integration of patient self-reporting into the electronic health record workflow provides such a solution. On the left of this cartoon, we see a patient experiencing symptoms. When the patient is enrolled into an electronic PRO program, that electronic system for the PROs can send a prompt on a regular basis to the patient, for example, weekly, asking the patient to self-report on their own symptoms. The patient then reports into the system. This goes into the electronic health record and can send a real-time alert notification to the care team for anything that's worsening or severe and warrants immediate attention. It can also be used to populate data visualizations or reports within the EHR so that the care team can view that information along with other clinical information at visits. Having this information then allows the care team to react, again, catching things earlier and avoiding downstream complications. I'm going to show a number of PRO interfaces. This first system is a freestanding PRO system, meaning this is an electronic system that is used in parallel to the EHR, but is not interfaced or integrated with it. We see that this system has a web interface, a mobile interface, and an automated phone system that can call the patient and use voice prompts for the patients to self-report. This is an example of a commercial PRO system that has been interfaced or integrated with a different commercial EHR system with, in this case, one of the major US EHR vendors. This shows a mobile interface that the patients use to self-report their own symptoms. This is from yet a different commercial EHR system. This is what we call native PRO functionality. This means that the EHR system within its foundational build has the ability to send surveys to patients through the patient portal. This is an example of a clinician visualization, starting again with a freestanding system. You can see what's typical in some of these visualizations is a line graph showing the longitudinal trajectory of the patient-reported information. This is a visualization within one of the major commercial EHR vendor systems showing a more tabular format. So in this format, the PRO information looks much more similar to laboratory values, as clinicians might be familiar viewing in EHRs, with the red and exclamation points showing abnormal values. And this is from yet another commercial EHR vendor that is interfaced with a PRO system, showing just a different way that this information can be visualized, both with the tabular and the graphical form with the longitudinal or the single time point format. This is an example of how PRO information can be brought into a note. One of the major advantages of having the PRO system within the EHR is that this information can be used automatically to populate the patient experience within notes. You see on the right side a note being populated by these three different elements on the left. First, what we see is that the PRO values themselves are imported into the note. Then using drop downs, the clinician can demarcate whether the symptoms are concerning or not and what actions were taken in response to the PRO information. This slide shows that there are multiple uses of the PRO information. Again, the patient at the top and down at the bottom, the four major ways PRO data within the EHR can be used. First, for individual patient management, as I've been alluding to. The second, for population health management, the PRO data can be used to risk stratify patients who warrant outreach by a navigator or care coordinator. The PRO data can be aggregated and used for quality assessment, for example, looking across a practice at the adequacy of pain management or management of nausea and vomiting following chemotherapy. And finally, the PRO data, once in the EHR, can become that last missing piece of real-world data that often is not present in real-world data sets. This slide I have shown before to this group, just as a reminder that there have been multiple randomized controlled trials and population studies demonstrating a host of clinical and utilization benefits to patients when PROs are used for monitoring patient symptoms in oncology practice. And on the right is a Kaplan-Meier curve from a study that my group presented at ASCO several years ago, showing an overall survival benefit of digital symptom monitoring using patient-reported outcomes during cancer treatment. This slide shows the feasibility of collecting PROs over time. In general, multiple studies have shown that in a real-world setting, when considering all comers within a practice, between about 60 to 80% of patients will self-report at any given time when prompted to do so. It's higher than that within clinical trials, but within clinical practice, that's a reasonable goal. This slide shows the key technical functions for integrating PROs into EHRs, broken down into the three key interfaces. First, the administrative interface, which needs to have a registration system for entering patients into the PRO program, and a dashboard showing patient adherence with self-reporting, which can then enable the practice to reach out to those patients who are not adhering to make sure they're doing all right. The clinician interface, which allows for the alert notifications to come in generally through a shared in-basket with an audit trail, keeping track of how those alerts are cleared, and data visualization, as I showed you earlier. And finally, the patient interface, allowing for electronic prompts through email, text, or phone call to remind patients of the time to report, with a follow-up prompt for those patients who don't self-report after the first prompt. The ability to access PRO surveys with very easy access. A major pitfall of the native PRO systems within EHRs is they are difficult for patients to access because they require portal participation, and then a functionality for alerts to be triggered for severe worsening problems. The key barrier to integrating PROs into cancer clinical care remains reimbursement. There are new CPT codes for remote therapeutic monitoring, but these currently have limitations that do not make them amenable to PROs in oncology. These limitations are shown below. The codes are currently restricted to respiratory and musculoskeletal conditions. They require more transmissions per month than is typical for PRO use in oncology, and they require direct MD supervision, which is really not feasible in these days of virtual care. For example, for a navigator or APP who might be fielding the PRO information. I will stop there and thank you for your time, and I look forward to our discussion.